The buzzing of my phone against the cheap rental gown was an unwelcome intrusion. "They're about to start lining us up," I hissed into the receiver, juggling my tasseled cap. "Yolanda, honey, it's Mom." Her voice was too bright, a telltale sign of bad news wrapped in flimsy excuses. "Listen, something's come up. My name is Yolanda, and that day, the day I was supposed to be celebrating 4 years of relentless work, late nights, and actual achievement, was the day the foundation of my future was truly laid, not with mortar and stone, but with a burning, bitter resentment." "What's come up, Mom?" I asked, already feeling a familiar cold dread creep up my spine. Around me, the air thrummed with excitement. Graduates were hugging, parents were beaming, cameras flashed. My own 2 seats, carefully reserved, remained starkly empty. "Well, Tanner has this gig," she began, and I could almost hear Dad, Warren, murmuring his agreement in the background. "His band, the Rusty Spoons, or whatever they're calling themselves this week. They got a last-minute slot at the Grimy Mug." The Grimy Mug, a dive bar notorious for sticky floors and even stickier patrons. "A gig?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Mom, this is my university graduation. I'm getting my degree in business administration, with honors." A little sigh, the kind she reserved for when I was being difficult. "We know, sweetie, and we're so proud. But this is a real opportunity for Tanner. A scout might be there. His talent needs nurturing, you know. Your degree, well, it's wonderful, dear, but it's just a piece of paper, isn't it? Tanner's music, that's alive. It's just a piece of paper." The words slammed into me with physical force. 4 years of ramen noodles, of library all-nighters, of group projects with slackers I had to carry. 4 years of proving I was more than just Tanner's older sister, reduced to just a piece of paper. "So you're not coming," I stated, not a question. The excited chatter around me faded into a dull roar. "We wouldn't miss it for the world if we could, you know that," Nancy chirped, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "But Tanner was so insistent. He gets so anxious before a show. He needs our support." Unlike me, apparently. I didn't need support. I just needed to understand my place. It had always been this way. My first spelling bee trophy, proudly brought home, was quickly overshadowed by Tanner's finger painting of a lopsided sun, hailed as a masterpiece of burgeoning artistic genius. My straight A report cards were met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," while Tanner's "saw" in music, ironically, was excused because the teacher just doesn't understand his unique approach. He was the prodigy, the special one, the boy whose every whim was a divine command. I was dependable Yolanda, the one who just got on with things. "Right," I said, my throat tight. "Well, enjoy the concert. Tell Tanner to break a leg, or don't. It doesn't really matter." "Oh, Yolanda, don't be like that." I ended the call. The procession started. Pomp and circumstance blared. One by one, names were called. Cheers erupted for each graduate. Parents waved, some even shedding tears of joy. I walked when my name, Yolanda, was announced, a polite smattering of applause from strangers filling the void. My eyes were fixed on those 2 empty chairs. Section C, row 12, seats 4 and 5. They gaped back at me, monuments to their priorities. My mother's words echoed, "Just a piece of paper." I pictured them, Nancy and Warren, crammed into the Grimy Mug, faces alight with adoration, as Tanner, my perpetually on-the-verge brother, probably mangled a cover of some classic rock song, convinced he was the next big thing. They'd be beaming, assuring each other that this was the moment. This was the breakthrough. They'd buy him drinks, praise his raw energy, conveniently ignore the off-key notes and the bored expressions of the 3 paying customers. The dean handed me my diploma, a heavy, embossed cardstock. It felt substantial in my hand, solid, real. I shook his hand, managed a smile that felt like a grimace, and walked back to my seat, the empty ones beside me screaming louder than any applause. I looked at the diploma, then at the vacant chairs. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest, displacing the hurt, crystallizing it into something else. Something powerful. One day, I whispered to the empty air, clutching that piece of paper so tightly my knuckles were white. One day, you'll understand what this is truly worth. It wasn't just a degree. It was a declaration of independence. It was the first brick in the wall I would build around myself, a fortress they would never again breach with their casual, soul-crushing dismissals. They thought it was just paper. They had no idea. My best friend Amara found me afterwards, her hug a welcome warmth. "They really didn't show?" she asked, her eyes full of a sympathy I didn't want. "Tanner had a gig," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Amara just shook her head, a knowing look on her face. She'd witnessed years of the Tanner show. "Their loss, Yoli, seriously. You're going to do amazing things." I nodded, the weight of the diploma in my hand a promise. I know. The celebration dinner Amara insisted on felt hollow, despite her best efforts. Every congratulatory word from her, every toast, just highlighted the absence of the people whose validation I had once craved. But as I picked at my food, a new kind of hunger was stirring within me. Not for their approval, not anymore. For something far more satisfying. That night, I didn't cry. I spread my piece of paper on my small desk in my tiny apartment and stared at it. It wasn't an ending. It was a starting gun, and I was already halfway down the track. They just couldn't see it yet. But they would. Oh, they would. The flickering neon sign of the 24-hour diner across the street cast long shadows into our cramped office. "Another all-nighter fueled by instant kimchi ramen?" Amara mumbled, pushing her glasses up her nose, her eyes glued to lines of code. "Gourmet choice tonight," I replied, stretching until my back cracked. "We're celebrating. That algorithm you cracked? It's genius." Our company, Innovate Solutions, was 5 years old, born from that piece of paper and a whole lot of shared desperation. We were still more grit than glamour, but we were building something. Something real. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I almost let it go to voicemail. "Yolanda, you there?" Nancy's voice, still too bright. "Hi, Mom. Busy." "Oh, always busy, you two. Well, just wanted to tell you Tanner's band, Sonic Boom. No, wait, is it Electric Sheep now? Anyway, they played at that new place downtown, the Velvet Underground, very exclusive, and a record producer was there. He said Tanner has raw charisma." "That's great, Mom." I could hear Amara snort softly beside me. "He really thinks this could be it. Yoli? He's so excited. We're all just holding our breath." "Right. Well, I have to go. Client deadline." "Oh, of course. Work, work, work. Don't forget your family, dear." Click. I tossed the phone onto a pile of discarded printouts. "Raw charisma," Amara deadpanned, not looking up. "Is that what they call it when you can't play in tune but look good in tight jeans?" "Apparently," I said, the familiar ache tightening my chest. She also invited me to Sunday dinner. Command performance. Sunday dinner was exactly what I expected. The small talk was exclusively Tanner-centric. He lounged at the table, regaling Nancy and Warren with tales of his latest brilliant venture. "So, I met this guy, super connected, you know?" Tanner gestured vaguely with his fork, nearly flinging mashed potatoes onto Dad's shirt. "He's an investor, international. He heard my demo, the one I recorded on my phone, super raw, super authentic, and he was blown away. Said, 'I'm the future of indie rock.'" Nancy clasped her hands together, her eyes shining. "Oh, Tanner, that's wonderful." Warren nodded enthusiastically. "See, Yolanda? Talent will out. This fellow, what's his name?" Rex. Tanner said, looking shifty for a split second. Rex Power. Yeah? He's setting up a showcase. Might even front me some cash for a proper studio recording. Says my sound is commercially viable but edgy. Rex Power. It sounded like a porn star name. I kept my expression neutral. And what percentage is Rex Power taking for this investment, Tanner? Tanner waved a dismissive hand. Details. Details. He's a patron of the arts, Yoli. He gets it. Not everyone's obsessed with spreadsheets. Some of us need spreadsheets to ensure patrons of the arts don't become patrons of our bankruptcy, I said mildly. Nancy frowned. Yolanda, don't be cynical. Tanner's finally getting his break. We should be supportive. I'm just asking practical questions, Mom. Well, sometimes practicality can just stifle creativity, she sniffed. Dinner continued in that vein. Tanner's grandiose plans, their blind adoration. I ate my overcooked roast beef, a silent observer at my own family's theater of delusion. They asked me nothing about Innovate Solutions. About my life? It was as if my world, the one I was painstakingly building, didn't exist beyond a vague notion that I worked with computers. Later that week, I was working late, Amara having already gone home. The office was quiet, just the hum of the servers. I'd forgotten my water bottle in the small break room we shared with a couple of other struggling startups on our floor. As I reached for it, I heard a hushed voice from the hallway near the shared kitchenette. Nancy. No, don't you worry about that credit card bill, sweetie. She was cooing into her phone. My blood ran cold. Dad and I will figure it out. It was for new equipment, wasn't it? For the band? Of course. You just focus on your music, on Rex. Don't let these silly money things distract you. A pause. I could imagine Tanner on the other end, probably whining. Yes, of course. We still believe in you. More than ever. This is your time, baby. I backed away slowly, my water bottle forgotten. The casual way she promised to cover his debts, the complete lack of accountability, it was a punch to the gut. They had never offered me a safety net. When Amara and I were eating instant noodles for the third time in a week to make payroll for our first intern, there were no hushed calls offering to figure it out. I'd asked for a small loan once, in the very early days, a fraction of what they were clearly shelling out for Tanner, and Dad had given me a lecture on fiscal responsibility. I walked back to my desk, the glow of my monitor suddenly harsh. The unfairness of it all, the sheer, blatant favoritism, burned hotter than ever. This wasn't just about a missed graduation anymore. This was a pattern, a lifelong dedication to propping up a fantasy at the expense of reality. And, increasingly, I suspected, at their own expense. My jaw tightened. They were going to learn about reality, sooner or later. 7 figures, Yoli, 7! Amara shrieked, waving the signed contract in the air. We actually landed the Omnicorp deal. I grabbed the paper, my own hands trembling slightly as I scanned the final page. Holy crap, Amara! We did it! We'd been pitching Omnicorp, a massive tech conglomerate, for months. This was it. This was the game changer. Champagne? Amara was already halfway to the mini fridge we'd splurged on last Christmas. The cheap stuff we save for maybe clients? Or the actual good stuff? I grinned. Oh, tonight we break out the bottle that costs more than our first server rack. We popped the cork, the fizz echoing in our slightly less cramped than before office. We'd moved up in the world, literally. A whole floor to ourselves now. The taste of success was sweet, heady, but as the initial euphoria wore off, a familiar pang of loneliness settled in. There were people I should be calling, sharing this with. But the thought of Nancy's inevitable pivot to Tanner's latest almost success story made my stomach clench. Instead, my phone rang a few days later. Aunt Melanie, Dad's sister, the family's reluctant news channel. Yolanda, dear, how are you? Her voice was always a little conspiratorial. I'm good, Aunt Melanie. Really good, actually. Business is booming. Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Someone in this family has their head screwed on straight. A beat of silence. Which brings me to, well, Tanner, I guessed, bracing myself. Who else? She sighed. He's been hitting up your Uncle Frank again. And cousin Sarah. Asking for loans. Small amounts at first. A couple of hundred here and there for band promotion or studio time. But it's adding up. And he's not exactly diligent about the repayment part. I'm shocked, I said, my voice dry. The thing is, Yolanda, Melanie lowered her voice, it's worse than just borrowing from family now. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Nancy and Warren are beside themselves. Tanner got mixed up in some online art scam, selling prints of stolen digital artwork as his own unique creations. Apparently, he thought no one would notice. My jaw tightened. What happened? A few of the original artists found out, threatened legal action. Nancy and Warren had to pay them off. Hush money, basically. Thousands, Yolanda. They cashed in some bonds, I think. They didn't want it to distract him from his real talent, as Nancy put it. Or more likely, they didn't want the embarrassment. Thousands. To cover up fraud. My 7-figure contract suddenly felt a little less celebratory. The irresponsibility was breathtaking. Are they okay? I asked, a strange mix of anger and a reluctant vestigial concern stirring. They're putting on a brave face, Melanie said, but Warren sounds stressed, and Nancy just keeps talking about Tanner's resilience, how he'll bounce back from this minor setback. A few weeks later, after the Omnicorp announcement had made minor ripples in the local business news, Mom called. Her voice was unusually tight, the forced cheerfulness strained. Yolanda, darling, we saw that little piece in the paper about your company. How nice for you. The praise felt like pulling teeth. Thanks, Mom. Listen, dear, she rushed on. Your father and I were wondering. We've had a bit of an unexpected repair come up. The roof, Old houses. A roof repair, I asked, keeping my tone neutral. How much are we talking about? There was a pause. I could hear Warren muttering in the background. Oh, it's quite a bit, Nancy fumbled. But don't you worry your pretty little head about it. Warren actually managed to find the money elsewhere. A friend, Very generous. A friend, I pressed. Who? Oh, just someone from his old golf club, she said vaguely. Anyway, must dash. Tanner's waiting for me to drive him to an audition. He thinks this one is really promising. She hung up before I could ask more. Liar, I said to the dead phone. A roof repair. Right. They were hiding something big. The art scam payoff must have hit them harder than Melanie knew. My mind raced, bonds cashed in. Now a mysterious friend with money for a roof. It didn't add up. The distant alarms I'd been hearing for years were suddenly blaring, up close and personal. And a cold, grim certainty began to form. The bill for Tanner's talent was about to come due, and it was going to be astronomical. The glossy pages of Ascend Business Journal felt heavy in my hands. There I was, a full-page feature. Yolanda, innovating the future, one solution at a time. Amara had insisted on framing a copy for the office lobby. I mailed one to Mom and Dad. No note, just the magazine in a plain envelope. Their call came a few days later. Yolanda, Warren, pick up the extension. It's Yolanda. Nancy's voice crackled with an almost manic energy. We got the magazine, dear, Warren said, his voice sounding thin. Very impressive. All those words. Yes, quite the article, Nancy chimed in. So, you're doing well then? We are, I confirmed. The Omnicorp contract has opened a lot of doors. That's nice, Nancy said, the familiar dismissive tone creeping back in. Speaking of opening doors, Tanner has a new venture. He's been reading up on it. Very cutting edge. Cryptocurrency. I almost laughed. Tanner is getting into crypto? What does he know about blockchain? He's a fast learner. Warren interjected, a little too defensively. He says it's the future, a way for the little guy to get rich quick. He's been watching videos online. He's already made a few small trades, very promising. He's so clever, you know, Nancy added. He sees opportunities where others don't. He just needs a little seed money to really make it fly. Seed money. My blood pressure spiked. And where is this seed money coming from? Oh, we're figuring it out, Nancy said vaguely. An advance on his future earnings, you could say. The conversation was brief, strained. They asked no more about my feature, my company. It was all Tanner, 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 and his foolproof plan to become a crypto millionaire. They sound different, Amara said later, after I recounted the call. She was perched on the edge of my desk, frowning. More than just the usual Tanner obsession. They sound desperate. They're always desperate for his success, I said, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Amara was right. There was a new edge to their voices, a frantic undertone I hadn't heard before. That evening, a nagging feeling prompted me to do something I hadn't done in years. I looked up public property records for my parents' address. My heart sank. A second mortgage, taken out 3 months ago, for a substantial amount. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, I whispered to my empty apartment. The roof repair. The friend from the golf club. It was all lies. They were leveraging their home, the home I grew up in, to fund Tanner's harebrained schemes. The art scam payoff must have wiped out their savings, and now this. A few days later, a letter arrived at the Innovate Solutions office, addressed to W. Collins, my father's initial. Our mail sorter, bless her efficient heart, probably saw the surname and our floor, and assumed it was for me, perhaps a misaddressed personal item. I almost handed it back, then paused. It was from Apex Collections Agency. Official. Urgent. My hands were clammy as I slid it open. My breath caught. It was a final demand notice for a high-interest short-term loan. The principal amount was staggering, far more than the second mortgage. And there, clear as day, were the names: borrower, Tanner; co-signer, Warren. Defaulted. The sum was enough to make me feel physically ill. This wasn't just a bit of a bind. This was financial ruin. They hadn't just covered his credit card bills or paid off art scam victims. They had, it seemed, systematically dismantled their entire financial security for him, for the prodigy, for the raw charisma. I stared at the letter, the stark black print a death sentence for their stability, the casual cruelty of their lifelong favoritism, the dismissal of my own hard-won successes, all of it coalesced into a single, chilling thought. They had made their bed, a very expensive, very uncomfortable bed, and Tanner was about to drag them down into it. The cold, hard resolve I'd felt on graduation day solidified into something akin to granite. The piece of paper they dismissed was now the foundation of an empire they clearly thought they could tap into. I folded the letter carefully, placing it in my desk drawer. Evidence. Not that I needed much more. Their desperation, their lies, Tanner's endless, reckless pursuit of unearned glory. It was all leading to this, a reckoning. And I had a front row seat. The sleek glass doors of Innovate Solutions hissed open, and there they stood, Nancy and Warren, unannounced. My receptionist, Chloe, shot me a wide-eyed, panicked look over the intercom. Yolanda, your parents are here? Send them in, Chloe, I said, my voice betraying none of the sudden iciness in my veins. They shuffled into my office, a space that screamed success, minimalist design, panoramic city views, the subtle hum of a thriving enterprise. They looked diminished, smaller, years older than the last time I'd seen them at that disastrous Sunday dinner. Warren's shoulders were slumped, his usual bluster gone. replaced by a nervous tick at the corner of his eye. Nancy's smile was a brittle, painted-on thing. "Yolanda, dear," Nancy began, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the expensive art, the custom-built mahogany desk. "What a lovely office. So modern." "Thank you," I said, gesturing to the uncomfortable designer chairs opposite me. "Please, sit." They perched on the edge of the seats, looking profoundly out of place. We didn't want to bother you at work," Warren mumbled, twisting the brim of an imaginary hat in his hands. "But it's important, Yolanda," Nancy cut in, her voice gaining a sliver of its old assertiveness. "It's about Tanner." Of course it was. "What about Tanner?" I asked, keeping my tone cool, professional. He's run into a spot of bother," Nancy said, attempting a light, dismissive wave of her hand that didn't quite land. "A string of bad luck, really. These creative types, you know, they're not always the best with practicalities. The crypto market took an unexpected downturn," Warren elaborated, staring at his shoes. "He lost quite a bit." "He was trying so hard, Yolanda," Nancy pleaded, her eyes welling up. "He just wanted to provide, to make us proud." Provide? Make them proud? The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. "How much is quite a bit?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. They exchanged a look. "Well, it's substantial," Warren admitted. "It's the loan, dear," Nancy said, her voice dropping. "The one your father co-signed for Tanner's venture. They're calling it in, and with the second mortgage on the house, we just don't have it." "So you need money," I stated, not a question. "We need your help, Yolanda," Nancy said, her voice cracking. "You're our daughter. Family helps family. You're so successful now. This amount, it's probably nothing to you." The sheer, unadulterated entitlement in that statement almost made me gasp. Nothing to me? The years of sacrifice, the 80-hour weeks, the constant stress of building something from nothing? "How much exactly?" I pressed. Warren finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperation that was almost pitiful. He named a figure. It was, as I already knew from the collections letter, astronomical. Enough to cripple a small business, let alone an individual. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. "That's a lot of money, Dad, especially on top of a second mortgage. And whatever you paid out for Tanner's art career." Nancy flinched. Warren's face went pale. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know," I said, my voice like ice. "What matters is that this isn't just a spot of bother, is it? This is years of enabling, years of bailing him out, finally catching up to you." Warren seemed to deflate. The fight went out of him. We've been covering his ventures for years, Yolanda," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "Nancy was so sure he was just one step away from making it big. That Rex Power fellow, the art thing, the crypto, it just kept escalating. We even used our retirement savings," Nancy added, tears now openly streaming down her face. "We thought he just needed support, not the stress of financial worries. We thought he was special." The depth of their delusion, their utter financial self-immolation for their golden boy, was far worse than I had imagined. They hadn't just been irresponsible, they had been systematically destroying their own lives on the altar of Tanner's mythical talent. "We're going to lose the house, Yolanda," Nancy sobbed, reaching a trembling hand towards me. "Everything. Tanner can't handle this. He's falling apart. He needs us. He needs you to fix this." Fix this. The words echoed in the sterile, successful space I had built. A chilling, almost pleasurable satisfaction began to bloom in my chest, cold and sharp. They weren't asking. They were expecting, demanding, in their own broken way. The dynamic had shifted, hadn't it? The dismissed daughter, the one whose achievements were just a piece of paper, was now their only lifeline. And I held all the cards. The next few weeks were a barrage of increasingly frantic voicemails. Nancy's tearful pleas, Warren's strained, awkward apologies, even a few garbled, resentful messages from Tanner himself, blaming the unfair system and bad market timing. I didn't return a single call. I let them stew in the mess they'd so meticulously created. Then an email from Nancy. Subject: urgent family meeting. She demanded, we meet at my home. It's imperative, Yolanda. We have a solution, but we need to discuss it in person. A solution. My eyebrows rose. This should be interesting. They arrived on Saturday morning. Not just Nancy and Warren, but Tanner, too. He slouched in, radiating an aura of petulant victimhood, his eyes darting around my spacious, light-filled living room with a mixture of envy and disdain. The desperation I'd seen in my parents at the office was gone, replaced by a strange, brittle confidence. They looked like people who had convinced themselves of a new, equally delusional reality. Yolanda, thank you for seeing us, Nancy began, a little too formally. She clutched a worn leather briefcase to her chest. Warren stood beside her, nodding like a programmed doll. We've spoken to a financial advisor, Warren announced, puffing his chest out slightly. A very good one. He's outlined a path forward. He says our only viable option is a debt consolidation loan, Nancy continued, opening the briefcase and pulling out a sheaf of papers. A very large one, obviously, to cover everything. The defaulted loan, the second mortgage, a little extra for Tanner to get back on his feet with a new, more stable project. I stared at them, speechless for a moment. A little extra for Tanner? After everything? The audacity was breathtaking. And the bank? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. What are their terms for such a generous loan to individuals with your current financial profile? Nancy beamed, a triumphant, almost manic glint in her eye. Well, that's where you come in, dear. The bank requires a guarantor, someone with substantial, unencumbered assets, someone like you. She slid a document across my polished coffee table. A loan application, with a space clearly marked for a cosigner. They need your business, Yolanda, Warren said, his voice firm, as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. Innovate solutions. As collateral. I looked from the document to their expectant faces. Tanner was actually smirking, a smug, entitled little curl of his lip. It's the least you can do, Yolanda, Nancy said, her voice hardening. After all we've done for you, all the sacrifices we made to give you a good start in life. Sacrifices? The word hung in the air, so ludicrous it was almost funny. What's a business really compared to family? She pressed on, her tone becoming almost accusatory. Blood is thicker than water, Yolanda. Tanner is your brother. We are your parents. You wouldn't want to see us out on the street, would you? The phrase, the one that had fueled my entire adult life, echoed in my mind, louder and clearer than ever. Your degree is just a piece of paper, and now my entire life's work, the empire I had built from scratch, from sheer will and relentless effort, was also, apparently, just a means to an end for them. A convenient asset to be leveraged for Tanner's endless failures. Tanner finally spoke, his voice dripping with arrogance. Yeah, Yoli. Stop being so selfish for once. It's not like you even need all that money. I'll pay you back, you know, with interest. When my new crypto strategy takes off, I've learned from my mistakes. He actually believed it. They all did. They genuinely thought this was a fair, even noble request, that I owed them this, that my success was somehow communal property to be dipped into whenever Tanner's latest genius plan imploded. I met their hopeful, demanding gazes. Nancy, her face set in lines of righteous expectation. Warren, nodding along, fully convinced of their logic. Tanner, already mentally spending the bailout money. A small, cold smile touched my lips. I let it linger, watching their confidence flicker, just a little, under my silent scrutiny. Is that your professional financial projection, Tanner? I asked, my voice soft, yet carrying an edge that made him blink. Based on your extensive track record of success, the air crackled. The carefully constructed solution they'd brought to my door suddenly seemed very fragile. The silence in my living room stretched, taut and heavy. Tanner's smirk faltered. Nancy's smile froze. Warren shifted his weight, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. I let them hang there, suspended in their audacious hope, savoring the slow dawning of unease in their eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, I leaned back in my armchair. No, the word, quiet but absolute, landed like a stone in a still pond. Nancy gasped, "Yolanda, what do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I repeated, my voice gaining strength, each syllable precise. "No, I will not co-sign your loan. No, I will not use Innovate Solutions as collateral. No, I will not bail Tanner out. Not now, not ever." I stood up, pacing slowly in front of them. "Let me tell you what I will do. I will remind you of a few things. I will remind you of every school play you missed because Tanner had a sniffle. Every award ceremony you skipped for one of his imaginary big breaks. I'll remind you of my university graduation." I stopped, looking directly at Nancy. "The one you couldn't attend because Tanner, your precious prodigy, had a gig at a dive bar. The day you told me my degree, 4 years of my life and hard work, was just a piece of paper. Her face flushed a dull, mottled red. "That's not fair, Yolanda. We always supported you in our own way." "Your way?" I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Your way was to make me invisible. Your way was to pour every ounce of your energy, your resources, your blind faith into him." I gestured towards Tanner, who was now glaring at me, his earlier arrogance replaced by a sullen fury. "And look where it's brought you. Look where E has brought you." I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled down my framed degree. I held it up. This piece of paper graduate built an empire from scratch, with no handouts, no safety nets, no one covering my ventures. "This empire," I said, my voice dropping to a steely whisper, "will not be used to subsidize the monumental, lifelong financial irresponsibility of this family, embodied by your special talent over there." "You're heartless," Nancy cried, tears of outrage, not sorrow, springing to her eyes. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done." "Done?" I shot back. "What exactly have you done for me, Mother, that wasn't secondary to Tanner's every whim?" "Dad?" Warren just looked at the floor, defeated. He knew. He'd always known, deep down. Tanner finally exploded. "You're just jealous," he spat, jumping to his feet. "You've always been jealous of me, because I have talent, and you just work hard. You're a bitter, jealous shrew." I almost smiled. Am I, Tanner? Or am I just the only one in this room living in reality? I turned back to Nancy and Warren. "Now, since you came here looking for solutions, I do have a couple of counteroffers. Not for the loan, of course. That's off the table. But for future interactions." They stared at me, confused, wary. "Option 1, I said, ticking it off on my finger. "I could, perhaps, offer Tanner an entry-level data input position at Innovate Solutions. Minimum wage, of course. Standard probationary period. He'd learn about actual work. Punctuality. Responsibility. Spreadsheets." Tanner's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm deadly serious," I replied. "Option 2. I paused for effect. "I might consider purchasing your house." Nancy's eyes widened, a flicker of desperate hope in them. "At its current distressed market value, naturally," I continued, crushing that hope instantly, "which, given the 2 mortgages and its likely condition, won't be much. And from that sum, of course, Tanner's documented debts to you both, the ones you so foolishly covered, would be deducted. If there's anything left, you could then perhaps rent a small room, from me, in what used to be your home." The offers hung in the air, demeaning, insulting, and utterly, deliciously within my power to enforce. They were designed to ram home exactly who held the cards now. Nancy, utterly undone, her face contorted with a rage so pure it was almost terrifying, shrieked the words that would sever the last, frayed thread of any connection I might have felt. "We always knew you were cold, Yolanda. Just competent, efficient. Tanner had warmth. He had charisma. He was special. What parent wants a merely competent child when they could have a star?" That final cruel dagger. It sliced through any lingering, misplaced empathy, any shred of doubt. Competent. As if it were a disease. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The rage was gone, replaced by a profound, icy clarity. I stood tall. "My decision is final," I said, my voice even, devoid of emotion. "You spent my entire life making sure I knew my place. Now you know yours." I gestured towards the door. "Get out of my house." I turned my back on them, on their stunned, horrified silence, and walked toward the large window overlooking the city. My city, built on competence, built on a piece of paper. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sound of their shuffling, defeated retreat was satisfaction enough. The silence in my house after they left was profound, like the air after a violent storm. It took a few days for the first ripples of the aftermath to reach me. Aunt Melanie called, her voice a careful blend of pity and unspoken judgment. "Yolanda, I heard about the house." "What about it, Aunt Melanie?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "They lost it. The bank foreclosed. Nancy and Warren are, well, they're in that little 2-room apartment over on Elm Street. You know, the rundown complex by the old railway tracks." I did know it. Bleak, cramped, a world away from the comfortable suburban home they'd sacrificed on the altar of Tanner. "And Tanner?" I inquired, keeping my voice neutral, aside down the line. "He's working at Burger Barn, flipping patties. Apparently, he tells anyone who'll listen it's just temporary. Research for a gritty screenplay about the struggles of the working class. Blames the predatory banking system and your cold-heartedness in equal measure." "Predictable," I murmured. "Your mother, she's left you several messages, hasn't she?" Melanie probed gently. "Dozens," I confirmed. Tearful ones, angry ones, pleading ones. Even a few from Warren, sounding like a broken record of regret and bewilderment. I hadn't listened to any of them past the first few seconds. I just deleted them. "Are you all right, Yolanda?" Melanie asked, a genuine note of concern in her voice. "I'm fine, Aunt Melanie. Thank you for the update." After I hung up, Amara walked into my office, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. She'd heard snippets, of course. It was hard to keep secrets in our close-knit company. "So," she said, settling into the chair opposite my desk, "the Empire struck back, huh?" I managed a small smile. "Something like that." "Any regrets?" she asked, her gaze steady, perceptive as always. I considered it, swirling the coffee Amara had placed before me. Witnessing their complete ruin, it isn't joyful, not exactly. There's a certain grimness to it, but the sense of balance, that's deeply satisfying, Amara. Profoundly so. I leaned back, looking out at the sprawling cityscape. The chip on my shoulder, the one I've carried since I was old enough to realize I was second best, it's gone. They spent a lifetime dismissing my achievements, my worth, my very being. Now they understand. They finally, truly understand. And that's enough? It has to be, I said. They made their choices. Over and over again. This is just the consequence. A few days later, I instructed my financial manager to make an anonymous donation to a local housing charity. A significant sum, untraceable back to me or Innovate Solutions. Enough to ensure that, while Nancy and Warren wouldn't live in luxury, they wouldn't be literally out on the streets. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even pity, not really. It was a final act of control, a quiet underscoring of my success versus their catastrophic failure, a way to close that particular ledger for my own peace of mind, not theirs. They would never know. It was a gift to myself, the gift of not having their destitution weigh on my conscience, however little they deserved my consideration. The calls eventually stopped. The silence from their end became a new kind of normal. Life at Innovate Solutions surged forward. We landed another major client. We hired more staff. We grew. One evening, I was working late, the city lights twinkling below. My framed degree sat on the corner of my desk. I picked it up, the smooth card cool beneath my fingertips. Nancy's voice, sharp and dismissive, echoed faintly from the past. Just a piece of paper. A private, knowing smile touched my lips. I glanced from the diploma to the vast, glittering expanse beyond my window, a kingdom I had built. Just a piece of paper, I murmured to the empty office. Turns out, it was the most valuable piece of paper they ever encountered. The lesson for them had been devastatingly expensive. For me, it was, in the end, priceless. The scales were balanced. The echo of those empty graduation chairs had finally, blessedly, faded. I was free.